Welcome to the New Agility podcast. I'm here with Chris Davis, and today we're going to be talking about the return to office drive. Is it a good idea? That's really the question we have today. Chris, I think we've noticed over the last year or so, since COVID, that companies are starting to enforce policies, not encouraging people to back to the office, but forcing people back to the office at least 2 or 3 days a week. What are your thoughts on this?
To be honest, I'm in two minds about it. I can see why people do it, why they kind of force us, why they want people back in the office. I think there's a number of reasons for that. But I can also see the other side, which is there really that much benefit to physically being in the office space? And to be honest, I think it depends. There's recently been who was the guy, the head of, was it CEO of JP Morgan, I think it was, who very publicly was recorded with a call saying that he thinks all this work from home Fridays thing is complete nonsense because he cannot get hold of anybody on a Friday, and that sort of thing. Which is interesting, because if he expects everybody to be in the office, if any leader expects everyone to be in the office, but they're not, then yeah, you might have a problem with it. But if the policy is you work from home when you want to, or you work from the office when you want to, and you are connected to the office, your email, your Slack or your Discord or whatever tools you're using, or MS Teams, etc., or your phone. And if those things are all connected to the office, I mean, right now, for instance, I've got my phone right beside me. I've got apps open for various chat things. I could be contacted almost, well, for a longer period of time during the day than I would if I was in the office. Because if I'm on a train commuting, I cannot be contacted half the time. And it's no point in talking on the phone there either. So I feel there's, for a lot of the time, it's, I think the whole, let's be flexible about this is probably the right way to be. But I think it's contextual, because there are times when, I know you and I have both been involved in situations where having people in a physical room together means you get work done quicker and to a higher quality, I believe, when you're workshopping with people in a physical space. And I think that will almost always be the case. There's no real substitute. Any video conferencing tool, it allows people to speak, but the dynamic is completely different. So I think there are situations in which we really should be in the office, but not necessarily all the time. What's your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with anything you've said. I think there's an issue around what's driving that desire, because I'm very suspicious when a global company such as one of these massive multinationals that you mentioned talks about getting people into the office to innovate, right? So yeah. I mean, when you go into one of these offices and you've got these rows and rows of desks, and everyone's got this massive monitor in front of them, and they're kind of pretty much cut off from everyone anyway, in a sort of psychological sense. I don't remember the last time I saw any innovation in an office, to be honest. So I think, not to say that you couldn't, I think the everyday life of people in an office, for a lot of people, particularly in big firms, is that it's quite an alienating experience. It isn't that kind of communal atmosphere that sitting together, a small team in one room, which I've certainly experienced. I mean, I've been in startup companies and worked. We've got a team around, and we chat and laugh all day long, and we're discussing things the whole time. And if there's a question, we don't send an email. We just say, "Oh, what was that?"
Exactly.
That kind of spontaneity. I've definitely experienced that. But that was actually the last time that happened was quite a long time ago for me, and it seems to have got progressively harder to get that, So if I think maybe 2010, I was in an office where it was starting to feel a little more alienating, but we didn't have all those big boards up. It was kind of open tables, and so you could still kind of see each other a bit. But yeah, it seems to have got worse and worse in that regard. So I think from that point of view, I think many companies fail on the let's get together to innovate. I don't think that's a good reason. On the other hand, perhaps they're worried about lack of focus, which I think may be a reasonable argument. I mean, I think when you're at home, sometimes perhaps there's other stuff going on. Sometimes not everyone's got clear boundaries in their home, or if something happens, then it can easily maybe you get distracted for an hour or so. Maybe there's some argument in that. And I think another one is if you're joining a company, so particularly for youngsters, it's kind of, you need something kind of tangible to relate to. I think that may be another factor for coming into an office.
You've listed three different things there. I think it's worthwhile diving into those. I think the whole innovation thing, I think is almost a separate topic, because I agree with you. Innovation doesn't happen just because you're in an office. Innovation can happen at any point. It's more about I gave a talk on this once years ago. It's about creating the environment in which innovation can happen, because it'll happen spontaneously. If someone sees a problem and we need a solution to this, people get together and they'll come up with a solution. You don't have to be in the same physical space for that to happen. And in some cases, I think being in a physical space can almost hamper that, especially if leadership basically is so command and control that you're focused on just getting stuff done, and you're not allowed to, but it's almost like, I have too much else to do, I don't have time to do innovation stuff. There's that kind of thing can happen. I like your point at the end about the whole new starters. I've had personal experience of this, because the last job I started was right in the middle of COVID lockdown. So I had 2 interviews, 3 interviews actually, one of which was with you. And I was hired by the company completely remotely, and I got my work laptop by a courier. I got an email to my personal account giving me a link to something to log on to, which would be set my work password and that sort of stuff. So all of that was done completely remotely, and full credit to a company that can pivot to, right, let's do everything remotely and actually make that happen pretty quickly for things like recruitment. But these days, a lot of teams are remote. But I remember back to time, you talk about 2010 when you were in an office space with people. I'm thinking back to a similar time, and it was a open plan office. So there was no walls across the entire floor, and everyone had, as you said, large monitors in front of you, so double monitors, which does have the psychological effect of closing you off from people. But the other effect in that particular place, and it might have just been the design of the building, but there was an awful lot of background noise going on. And the way the teams I was working with at the time, I remember walking in there one day, and there were long tables. You could fit 8 people around them. We didn't have anybody at the ends, but there were 4 on one side, 4 on the other, and of course you had monitors in the way. So you almost had to,
yes.
anybody.
Was working,
Exactly. And even then, what we found is, if you could talk to the person beside you, okay, but even the person on the other side of your monitor, the other side of the table, it was difficult. You had to raise your voice to be heard, which creates another problem, which creates another little barrier to innovation for communication and collaboration. And we wanted the team to collaborate. One of the guys on that team came up with an idea, and I walked in one day after going to my desk I used to have with the leadership team. I then walked in to go and say hello to the guys, and everybody was at the desks with headphones on. Everyone, the entire team had their headphones on. And of course, I looked at this, and my first reaction was, oh my God, everyone's isolated. They might as well be remote. What are they doing? Is everybody just listening to music now? So I raised this one of the guys early on, and he said, no, we're not listening to music. We're listening to each other. I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, we've got Discord on our machines. So we're open a voice chat channel on Discord. And now through our emails, we can literally talk to anybody. We just say, hey, Mark, what was that thing you just checked in at the moment? Does that work? Okay, great, thank you. And it was that. You got that instantaneous communication electronically, as if they were remote, because they couldn't interact anyway, even though they were physically co-located, which I thought was fascinating.
I mean, that's really fascinating. So you're using kind of remote tools actually to overcome the kind of the distance created in an office space.
Correct.
Because of the design. I mean, one day maybe somebody will find a better way of designing stuff, but I've never seen it in an office these days. Which also reminds me of the whole meeting thing, right? So again, in a drive to get people back, you see suddenly, we're going to get everyone who's in this location is going to be in one meeting room, and everyone else dials in, and that's actually the worst possible solution to a meeting. Once you've got one person remote, then it's better if everyone is dialing in, even if you're in the office. Dial into a call.
Yeah, the only time I've seen that work well is if the minority are in the physical room and the majority are elsewhere or remote.
Okay. But even then, usually, like there are these specks on the camera, you can hardly see them. It takes them an age to get set up.
Yes.
And you can't really hear them; they're echoey, so the sound quality is much worse.
It certainly can be.
I really think there's zero benefit to having some people in a meeting room and others on the call. I think just everyone should be on the.
Yeah, you should. Yes.
Food. If there's food.
I know. If there's food. I remember a situation in which I attended a meeting. I was coaching a fairly broad team, and we had people in two different locations, both in the same sort of geographical region, but it was two offices, 2 towns apart, right?
Yes.
And what was happening was that there was a meeting to review and sign off a document. And partly because we'd been talking about feedback loops and delays and getting work done, right? Someone, the team leader or someone, I forget exactly who, decided that we're going to have a sign-off meeting rather than circulating a document around and waiting for 3 weeks before no one signs it.
Yeah.
Right. So we had this meeting, and it was, I can't remember what the schedule for, but we had pretty much everyone who had a say in the approval of this document. And the guy who was running the meeting ran through it paragraph by paragraph. Have you got anything to say about this? Has anyone got anything to say?
Yeah.
And it was like, wait a couple of seconds. If no one's got anything to say, it's approved by default. Right?
Yeah,
move on to the next section. 1.2. Anyone got anything to say? And people would come in with suggestions, and he would type. He had the whole thing was shared up on the screen, so you had this real-time review and correction, or evolution of a document on the screen with people from remote. And if they had something to say, raise your hand.
Fantastic.
Say something, and it worked. It worked really, really well.
People in a group of people in one meeting room, and then another group of people in another meeting room.
We had, yes, I think we had 3 or 4, and plus people remote working from home.
Yeah. I mean, I think, if the meeting is mainly sharing a screen, then, it's not really important that you're seeing people or not seeing people. Everyone's focused on a screen. I think that works.
It can work.
But, you can achieve the same if everyone's at their own desk. And sharing a screen, but I get it. I think sometimes there's a danger if you've got a group of people in a meeting room and then some people online, some people in another. The tendency is to have side conversations in your space, which actually is usually not what you want, right? You want it to involve everyone. So I'm still not sold on the meeting room for people who are there while there are other people online.
I know what you're saying. I think that part of that, I think, is about facilitation. Or let's put it this way: the risks of that can be at least partially mitigated by really good facilitation. So you want someone who can make sure that certain people are being heard, or that side conversation happen. If you set boundaries and rules for the meeting right at the start, here's how we're going to interact. We have this situation, so that means we're going to operate like this, which means one person talks at a time. If you want to interject, you raise your hand.
Yes.
Things like that can make that process more workable.
Absolutely, and I've been in those situations where even conferences which are semi-online and semi-in-person, and I'm trying to facilitate a workshop with both groups. But in every case, if everyone is online at their own computer, it's easier. Everyone can raise their hand in the same way, the same virtual way. Everyone can share the screen in the same way. If you've got an interactive board, everyone can use it in the same way. Which, if you've got some people in the room, they cannot use a virtual board because they're all sitting, looking at a big screen. Unless, of course, you're all in the same meeting room and you have your laptop with you. I've seen that model sometimes.
Yes. So, given what we've already discussed, then, what might be a really good reason to insist that everyone's in a physical space at the same time?
I think a good idea is to try and synchronize on days where a particular group, particular community of people can do specific activities together which require in-person.
Okay, like what? What sort of specific activity?
It would depend, of course. This would require that you don't have a team that's split across locations, right? So it could be a planning session or some kind of a kickoff session for a new product. Where you're doing a post-it note exercise of something, generating lots of ideas. I think that could work. Or if you've got even a retrospective can work in that way. Maybe a chance also maybe between let's say a software team and product business people come together once a week or once a month to kind of interact and discuss topics together. I think that could help improve relationships. Meeting in person. I definitely.
Now you've hit that on the head.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's it. So I come to that whole thing about relationships, and I had the kind of thought in the back of my head, but I couldn't put it into words until you mentioned that. It is about relationship.
Yes.
I think to a great degree, all the way through 2020, 21, 22, I felt very remote from the people who I was working for.
Yes, yeah.
Right. Specifically because
it becomes a very sort of dry,
transactional
interaction, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly. But so I think that you're right when you talk about kickoffs, retros, things where it requires relationship, it requires a level of interpersonal trust. Having that face-to-face across the table, I think, makes a massive difference.
Definitely.
So I would definitely agree that if you're going to bring a team of people together, you start off with them all in the same space, if at all humanly, physically possible. I remember, God, this is going back quite some time, 10 years or more, where we had a group of people down here in Surrey and a group of people up in somewhere near Newcastle. So a long way remote.
Yeah.
But I think about, was it 2 or 3 times a year, we had, I forget what they called them now, they were basically hackathon days.
Yeah, it was a get together of some kind.
Yeah, right? It was a practice meeting, exactly what it was. And we alternated venues each time. So one day it was down south and everyone from the north came down south. The next time we reciprocated and everybody would stay in a local hotel for the night. It took place over the full following day, but then we'd drive down the following evening. So it was only one night in the hotel. But getting everyone from the 2 locations together, and there was the agenda for the whole day started off with a very informal, let's have breakfast. It was a continental breakfast and coffees and teas and stuff, and just hang around and chat. And that alone made such a difference in just getting people to know the people. You've seen their faces on a screen somewhere and their name on an email, but getting to have a chat with them, oh my God, you're actually a tall guy, or things like that.
It's a good trust builder. They say that sharing food is one of those necessary icebreakers, as it were. You eat together with people. It's a pattern for good relationships.
One of the things that really made that work as well that day was when the leadership team made a concerted effort to bring the 2 locations together. So because we had like a practice manager in one in each location, the whole day was facilitated by them, but they alternated, right? So it
Yes.
was
Yes.
there was a sense that they were equals. Therefore, the two locations were equal. There was no
Yes.
one over the other, right?
Yeah,
When we
that's
did
often that often happens actually. There's a
exactly
hierarchy of locations,
correct, so
which I
you have
don't
to
think is very
mitigate that.
healthy. Yeah.
It's not healthy at all, yeah. So you have to mitigate that.
Mm.
But when they very intelligently did that, let's make sure everyone's. Also, when you create little hackathon teams,
Mm.
you divided people up so there's an equal number of people in each location on each team. So
Yes.
you had
Yes.
teams of four, two from the south, two from the north, and you work together. That sort of thing.
Nice.
It's that kind of facilitation that can make
Mm.
those co-location days work when
Mm.
it's for a specific
I think
thing.
I think the key point here is that all of that is very deliberate. You have to
Yeah.
kind of really be conscious about doing it, which maybe people think, well, God, that's such a heavy lift. Why can't we just say, just everyone get in the office and stop, messing about? Which, I can understand that. But yeah, anything to do with team dynamics does require a little bit of deliberate action. And I think,
Yes, I agree.
I think there are probably a few, maybe there are smaller companies or whatever, where it just kind of happens organically because of it's small. But I think for most people, it's just not that experience, and so turning up to the office kind of feels pointless. And additionally, the kind of catch-22 is because people are going into the office less, then offices then reduce the number of desks available, and then they have to then move to a hot desk model, which then makes it less appealing to go into the office because you have to book a desk, or it's not even your own space anymore. It's not like in a cafe where you just turn up and you sit anywhere and you just grab a cup of coffee. When you've got your workstation and your bits and bobs, it's, no matter what they say, they try and say clean desk policy, this, that, or the other, just log in anywhere. You still need a little bit of a space, don't you?
No, I totally agree. It's funny because you talk about the fractal element of this. When, as an organization, you say, don't quote me numbers, we've got 5,000 people in the company in this building over 5 floors or whatever, right? And we know from the statistics that only 80% of people are ever in the building at any one time. Therefore, we're going to cut the desk space down by 20%, blah, blah. Well, that doesn't scale down, because when you get to the individual team space, you will find days, let's for argument's sake, say every team has 10 people in it. You'll find that on some days, in some teams, there's only 6 of them in the office, but other times there's 9 or 10.
Yeah.
But those people where they want to get the 10 in, they can't, because there's now only 8 spaces at the desk.
Whereas have to go to the other end of the building and then they have to dial in. So it's kind of preposterous. That's a real ill thought out policy, I think. I mean, I get it. I understand they're reducing. They're thinking on a macro scale, large numbers. Why are we paying the rent? Blah blah blah. But it really doesn't solve the problem. And it's almost like you need to timeshare spaces. So maybe a whole team can have a space on a given day, and then for another day it's another team space. But you need all the space for all of your team, don't you? So I don't know. Maybe that's the answer.
Maybe that would be an interesting model. I've never seen something like that happen specifically, but that might be an interesting way of doing it.
Because also when there's less capacity than there are people, what do? You think, all right, I'm going to go into a day when it's less busy, so I can get a desk, and so you're by default going in when there aren't other people there. So
exactly.
Which again defeats the purpose.
It does, but again, I think we've gone to a point now where COVID has made us think differently about the whole aspect.
Yeah.
And even people who used to commute into work 5 days a week are now finding that the benefits of working from home a large amount of the time, if not permanently, has other benefits entirely. So as you say, when it's about, right, as a team, let's go in on Thursdays and Thursdays and Fridays or whatever, or Wednesdays and Thursdays. You can say we can do that, but then one member of that team has now found that because he's been on lockdown or from working from home for so long, he's now got appointments with taking his mother to the doctor or other things that are going on around him, their home life. is it incumbent upon of that person to now say, well, we're now back to where we used to be. You need to change your your home life in order to fit in with our schedule, or is it more fair to say, we understand you have other things going on, and as long as you're meeting all your responsibilities, that's fine. So you don't have to come in the office any specific day if you can't. If there's other more compelling reasons for you to work from home. But then you get other, as you said earlier, the problem we got 8 members of a team in the office and 2 members working remotely, and then of course at some point in the day they're not available for whatever reason. That could be tricky too. I don't think there's a single answer to this that is universally applicable. Like so many other things, it's all about context.
I think that's a good point. What I think is perhaps frustrating are these kind of broad brushstroke policies, which I understand you have to do, but the reasons given for it or what they imagine will happen as a result is just not true. It's completely false. The idea that everyone turns up at the office and suddenly everyone's interacting, blah blah blah, it's just not going to happen.
Or it does happen, and you get everyone forced to come into the office, and then you get the situation where there's just too much noise for anyone to focus and concentrate.
I remember working with one guy, and he joined our startup, which was starting to grow.
Yeah.
He was like the tech lead. He was, and he said, it's like a chicken pen in here. I can't think straight because we were always jabbering away. I mean, God, there was always some requests going on. I mean, it was very noisy. And not great for a lot of people also, particularly neurodiverse people often really struggle with that background noise. This can be really kind of overwhelming
that's right.
Cognitively. So
but there's also the fact that different people who do different jobs need different atmospheres.
Yes.
So I've always said I've got this thing that software engineering is misnamed. I don't think it's engineering discipline at all. It's a craft. It's about problem solving.
Yeah.
So it literally is creative problem solving over and over and over and over again. You cannot solve problems. It's a mental exercise, right? And you're hiring people to think, sometimes individually and sometimes collectively.
Mm-hmm.
Your atmosphere's got to support that. So it's got to allow for. And personally, I always think best when I've got other people to talk to or to bounce ideas off, because sometimes it's just saying something out loud. You have to rehearse it. You think, no, wait a minute, that's I'm talking nonsense now.
I think it depends what kind of thing. If you're talking maybe strategy and things like that, then that's a good thing to discuss with people. If it's like a coding problem, not that I do any coding really anymore, but I would just need to be left alone, and often the solution would come when I'm actually nowhere near anybody. It could be overnight. I would, wake up the next day and come back, and then bang, I could fix a bug. So, this it's a very blunt instrument to say everyone back in the office, then everything will work fine. I think it's a kind of a nonsense, really. But there are benefits, but they have to be thought through.
Agreed.
And I think companies have to think about in what way are they setting up their offices to make the thing that they're hoping for to happen in an office actually happen in an office? Because right now I don't see any evidence of that at all.
I agree.
Skiing, kind of call center style setups of massive open plan areas. I mean,
I think you and I
all wrong.
You know me quite well. I think, like in a lot of other subjects, I'm very much here in favor of empowerment and autonomy to a degree.
Yeah.
And I think a company policy needs to be able to say to people, we are trying to promote, call it innovation, call it collaboration, whatever, right? And say, here's what we want to do. We want each of you, depending on the type of work that you do, the size of your team, your location, your personal circumstances, you guys figure out what you need to do in order to make this a more collaborative space, a more innovative space, or whatever. What are the not the condition? what's the outcomes you want to achieve, and then leave it to local leaders to say, so you've got people who are in sales, for example, would probably need a completely different environment to those people who are in a development team.
Yes.
Right. How does that work? And I think it's about local leadership at much lower levels to be able to say, here's what my team needs, therefore let's create this environment for that team, and run it at that sort of level.
I did actually have a part to play in that one company where we said design your own office was a drive. And I basically tried to get all the software guys together to give me sort of user stories of what they needed for their space. And I mean, it definitely helped. I mean, there were still certain restrictions which we couldn't get, but we still ended up with these, banks of desks and this kind of the very thing that you don't want was there because I don't know, because of just HR rules, whatever it was. But there were certain compromises made, which made the sort of separation of spaces a little bit easier, so the team could be connected. And also they put a massive stairs because we were on 2 floors.
Yeah,
a massive stairs in which you could also be sat on to watch presentations and things. It was like a which kind of reduced the separation between the 2 floors. Because it just felt like you're continuing on the same floor. Yeah. So that was a really nice. I mean, that I didn't design that, but I said as a user story that we need less separation, right? So that's what they came up with. So that was, it was taken on board to some extent, I have to say.
I think it's a great one. I've got a slightly different one. I didn't even think about using the whole user story idea, but I was asked to physically design, to actually come up with a design for an office space because we were moving from one office to another.
Yeah.
And the place we were moving to, we'd already decided it was completely open plan. It wasn't a big building. The floor size wasn't huge. I can't remember exactly how much, but I think we got about 200 people in there, just over 200 people across 2 floors. And that was capacity, so not massive. And I thought about all the criteria for it. And I talked to a few people about what do you need, but I didn't actually do the whole user story, which is a great one. But anyway, what I came up with was, it was based around teams.
Yeah.
But it was also based around flexibility, because I recognized that teams flex. Okay. So what I asked for was these partitions, these portable partitions. They're about 5.5, 6 feet high, but they're not all the way to the ceiling. Okay. And so that you can move them. And the idea was you created a team space with these partitions with a gap for a doorway, if you like, and you had a table. I think we had in the middle of the design, and people around the outside of that with there was space on the partitions to put all your any information you wanted up on the wall. So you could literally have one of them was a whiteboard space, so you could put all that stuff up there. You could also project anything from a laptop onto there, kind of stuff like that. It was rejected, but I still think it was one of the better ideas I've ever had. Which is, if you can flexibly create space for teams.
Yeah. No, I think we did something like that, and they acted as a bit of soundproofing as well. These kind of dangling. I can't remember what it was now, but something dangling from the ceiling, which were movable. Yeah, they were movable.
Yeah. I think so. That's the idea of flexible team spaces creates that. It then makes it possible for people to join in, and without too much distracting noise space. The only noise you've really got is those immediately around you.
Yeah.
So when you want to collaborate, you can. You've already got your team space. That also, I thought, would cut down on the need for additional meeting or conference rooms, because anytime the team needs to get together, you're already there.
Little space there.
Yeah. You just have to pay attention. It's not like you need an extra space. It's already there. So there's that. That was benefit to it as well. So there's also a solution to this.
Chris, we could go on talking and talking.
Yes.
But it was a pleasure to discuss this. Let's leave it there. And
I think it's a good space to leave it. Yeah.
Let's leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adam. All right then. Take care. See you next time.